Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stretch Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.5 support tier list. So first off, we're going to talk about some of the new considerations, what's sort of changing in the meta, what's hot right now. Then we'll get into the tier list itself. If you don't have time to watch the whole video, you can always find timestamps in the description. You can find a link to this Google Doc in the description as well. Let's go ahead and get in here. Now, I do have a separate video for the 8.5 patch notes. If you want to look at a detailed overview of that, I have that linked for you as well in the Google Doc here. And I have the top 5 champions for each role right there as well. So if you want to know what do I think about mid lane, top lane, jungle, AD carry, that'll be the video for you right there. Okay, let's get into supports here. So the biggest thing that's happened over the last couple of patches, and explicitly this patch, is the fall of tank supports. And there's several reasons for this. The primary reason is that the resolve tree as a primary tree is trash now. It's really bad. It feels awful to play a champion that has to go resolve as the primary tree. So anyone that wants Guardian or Aftershock as a support is going to feel really bad. With a couple of notable exceptions, anyone that can use Revitalize is okay. So if you want to go resolve on someone like Janna, or resolve on like Guardian Janna, Guardian Soraka, Guardian Rakan, that type of stuff, that's okay because they have heals and shields. But anyone else, it just feels really bad because Overgrowth is just a steaming pile of garbage. This is so bad. You know, in a 25 or 30 minute game, you might get an extra 150 health, maybe 200 health. It's really, really bad. And the payout is very low. They need to lower this to like 6 enemy minions or monsters, so that way, you know, every wave you would get 0.2%, and then you could count on like every minute you'd get 0.4, and then, you know, after 2 minutes you'd have like 0.8, which, you know, is still not that much. But at least you could count on, you know, if it was 6, it would be like every 2.5 minutes or so you'd get 1%. So, you know, 5 minutes you'd get like 3%. So that would actually be pretty decent, but as it is, it's awful. Unflinching feels really bad too. Like, you get a little bit of tenacity, which is good for some kind of tanks that want to like chase people, but this is much better for like bruisers if you really need that. Like, a lot of tanks that are going to go in and fight, they don't really care about tenacity that much, because after they go in and do their engage, if they're like, you know, Alistar or Blitzcrank or Nautilus or whomever, Thresh, then they're not going to care that much if they get slowed or CC'd, typically. You know, they just want to get in there and disrupt. And that's fine. So that's bad. However, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, these two trees are really good right now. So Second Wind is still one of the most powerful runes in the whole game. It gives you just an insane amount of sustain early on. And then Bone Plating has risen to prominence as a very, very powerful ability that hasn't been seeing a ton of play yet. I've been talking about this for a couple of patches now. Whenever they brought this in, I said, hey, this actually looks pretty good. And I've been running it on a lot of my champs right now. And I'm telling you, this is the defining meta right now. Some people have caught on, some people haven't. But I've even seen AD carries running Second Wind and Bone Plating. And it makes it very difficult to poke those champions out. Like, I was playing Nami the other day, and there was a Zyra that, like, ran Doran's Shield, and then she ran Fleet Footwork, Second Wind, and Bone Plating. So she had like 4 different regeneration effects, and she may have run Bloodline. I don't know. She probably ran Alacrity from up here. But she had the healing from Fleet Footwork, she had Doran's Shield, and she had Bone Plating and Second Wind. And she had a Rakan who was running Guardian. It was so hard to poke them out of lane. We ended up winning the game, but I was just like, man, I feel completely worthless as Nami because it took like half my mana bar just to even cut through any of her health. So that combination is really, really good, especially against poke. Like, it's good against poke and it's good against all-in. Now, Bone Plating, you might think, well, if they just auto-attack you and then don't attack you anymore, then it doesn't trigger anything. That's true, but keep in mind that, you know, the trading patterns, especially of most supports in the bot lane, are not just single auto attack. Like, they're going to go up, usually auto attack you with an ability, and Aery's going to hit you. So this will completely block all of Aery's damage if she hits you, because it's 20 less damage, and Aery does 20 damage, so Aery does nothing. And it'll pretty much block most of the auto attack as well. Okay, so it only works against the champion that triggers it, blah, blah, blah. Now, I think how this stacks is this is after armor. So I talked about this on the stream the other night. Let me bust out the... I don't think I have the calculator open. Let me bust it out real quick here. So let's say that, you know, early on someone's trying to do, like, you know, 50 damage to you, and you have 30 armor. So your armor, calculate armor like this. Okay, so you're only going to take 76% damage from physical sources. So they're dealing 50 damage. Okay, so their auto attack would normally do about 38 damage to you. And then this is going to reduce it further by 20. So it's only going to do 18 damage to you. So instead of taking the 50 normal auto attack damage, you would only end up taking 18. So that is a lot of damage reduced early on. So that's the power of this rune, is it applies after armor, I'm pretty sure. So that's what makes it. So 20 doesn't look like much, but the fact that that's applying to damage after armor is applied, I'm almost positive that's how it works. You take a lot less damage. And I'll tell you anecdotally, when you have this thing up, it just feels like you're taking virtually no damage early on. And then that's also going to trigger second wind, so you're still going to be healing up through that. So this is really, really good. And this is great against assassins, even later on in the game. I mean, if a Zed's trying to all-in you or something like that, and he hits you with, you know... Let's go back to this. Let's say that you have, I don't know, 60 armor, and Zed's hitting you for, you know, with 3 abilities for 250 a pop. Well, divided by... Okay, so you'd be taking 62 damage times 250 abilities. You'd be taking 156. That bone plating is going to knock off, you know, like 40. So instead of taking 250 damage a pop from Zed, you'd only be taking like 116 3 times. So instead of taking like 750 damage, you're only taking, you know, like 345 damage. So it's like cutting it in half. Now, yeah, armor is going to drop a lot of that as well, but... I'm just telling you, this adds up, and it's really, really strong. So it's not going to make you invulnerable or anything, but it's a lot better than people think it is if you haven't really, like, messed around with that yet. It's really, really good. So that is good. It's just unflinching is trash, and they have nerfed Aftershock. They just nerfed it again on this patch, and they've nerfed Guardian. So, you know, Resolve Secondary, good. Resolve Primary, real bad. Okay, Eye of the Aspect is trash now. This is another thing. It's just really bad. And this was the old Eye of the Equinox, for those of you that lose track of the names, the health one. There are a couple of things that make this item really bad. First of all, as everybody knows by this point, the tier 2 is all that you need to get the wards now. So with every champion, it's 850, and you get some amount of stats with this, right? Well, what they've changed about this item... See, now the bandit loss doesn't matter. Like, this extra golden stuff, everything got changed. That's fine. What happened on 8.5? That's not what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter too much. But this 50 loss of health is a really big deal early on. You're going to be a lot squishier. And it doesn't heal your 80 carry as much. It's reduced by 50%. Oh, that's against a ranged champion. Okay, so that doesn't matter as much. They removed the shield battery on this back in 8.2, which was huge. I mean, this was arguably the best quest reward. I think it's difficult to argue that anything else was better than this. I mean, that shield battery was massive, 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 because the shield scales with armor and magic resist. So being able to power up the shield was a really big deal. And then they lowered, like, the healing on it at some point, too. I don't remember when they did that. That might have been, like, right before that. 2% missing health. Anyways, they've nerfed this item several times, but the most recent thing, the loss of the shield a few patches ago, was a big deal. And then also, this doesn't have CDR at tier 2. That's very key to note, is there is no CDR on this item at tier 2. And the CDR cooldown reduction is a very big deal for supports. So you'll notice Frostfang has 10% CDR. Nomad's Medallion has 10% CDR. This does not. You only get the 10% CDR when you finish Remnant of the Aspect, and it takes 950 gold to finish this item. Most champions do not get to the tier 3. They just will not get it early on, unless you're like a challenger or a pro-level player where people are heavily contesting your vision, and you need that 4th ward. It is really bad to upgrade this to upgrade Frostfang and Nomads to tier 3, unless you just happen to have a chunk of extra cash laying around. Because the stats aren't worth it, and you're only getting the 4th ward, and honestly, most people that are Platinum and lower are not going to be using their wards efficiently most of the time anyways. Like, there are several, you know, coaching sessions that I do from people from all elo ranges, and even when I go back and watch some of my own play and think, man, I could have warded better there, I should have warded that, or I should have warded this. It happens to everybody. Just a lot of people that aren't challengers and pro-level players are not going to be using their wards efficiently anyway, so getting that 4th ward is not really going to do that much for you. Remember, you can only have 3 wards on the map at any time anyways. So that 4th ward really only comes into play if you're moving your vision forward or if they are killing your wards. And if you're placing wards in good places and you have good control over areas, then they're not going to be killing that many of your wards, probably. So it's not worth it most of the time to upgrade this. But with Equinox, you have to, because you need that 10% CDR. So that right there is basically a tax. It's a 950 gold tax on you to go get that CDR. And they nerfed the full thing to where it only gives 350 HP now, which is really bad. Sadie, pick a spot. She's just like walking around my keyboard. So yeah, I mean, if you look at the gold value of this thing, I mean, I guess you are getting some stats off of it, sure, but this extra health regen, that's too much. Like, that's really bad outside of combat on most champions, outside of things like maybe like Soraka, and she's not going to get this item. Like, most champions just don't care about base health regen outside of the laning phase. So you're basically just getting 350 health and 10% cooldown for 1,800 gold. You know, 1,800 gold is a lot. Like, that's almost a full item. That's almost a redemption. You know, it's almost a Mikhail's. So it just feels really bad because they've nerfed the health on this item, and they force you to go to tier 3 to get the cooldown reduction, which means you have to build tier 3, whereas you don't have to do that on other champions, so it's 950 extra gold. It's just, you're paying so much money for just so little stuff, and they nerfed, like, even the very base from 75 health to 50 health. So they just nerfed this all the way around. You know, it doesn't have the shield batter anymore. It heals you for less. It heals your ally for less. It's this 950 gold tax to get to the 10% CDR. The health is really low on it compared... It used to be 500 health. I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah, they lowered the cost by 100 and knocked off 150 health. Not worth. Not worth at all. For comparison, 150 health is worth 400 gold. So they basically knocked 300 gold worth of value off of this item. Which, you know, tanks were really good, you know, over the last, like, 3 or 4 patches, and that's fine. And I say this as someone who primarily gains the most elo in an enchanter meta. I do like tanks, but realistically, enchanters are usually my highest win rate champions. Well, that's not entirely true. Zyra is almost always a high win rate champion with me, too, but, you know, I'm just saying, I'm not like I don't necessarily... I'm not biased towards tanks, is what I'm trying to say. Sorry, the cat's distracting me. I'm not biased towards tanks, but I think it was nice to have some tanks relevant because tanks weren't good at all last year. It was like almost an entire calendar year where tanks were mostly irrelevant and outshined by enchanters and AP champions really early last season. So I think it was cool to have tanks be relevant. I don't think they were that overpowering. I still think that Janna and Lulu and these other champions were still fine, but... They've kicked the tanks in the face several times now, and it's adding up. It's really bad now. So the combination of the reshuffling here to where tanks can't get Iron Skin and Second Wind, and the nerfs to Aftershock, repeated nerfs to Aftershock, have really hurt tank supports quite a bit. So that's kind of the big deal. And that 350 health is not only do you just lose the base health, you also lose the scaling on Locket, which scales off of health. And most of the tanks have some kind of scaling based on your health too, whether it's Tahm Kench or Braum or whomever. Alistar is kind of an exception there, but most of them have some kind of HP scaling, so it hurts their scaling too. And the items just still aren't good. They've also nerfed things like Knight's Vow over the last few patches. They're about to change Locket next patch. I mean, we'll see what happens, you know, next patch, obviously, but... Enchanters almost always outscale tanks at 2+ items. You know, once they get their Redemption and Ardent Sensor or something like that, you're not going to catch up most of the time. So, I don't know. I think that tanks are in a terrible spot right now. Pro play is not really reflecting that yet. People aren't playing on 8.5 yet. But I think, at least in solo queue, tanks are in a really rough spot. Okay, rise of damaged junglers. So another thing to keep in mind is that damaged junglers, they've nerfed tank junglers quite a bit too. I mean, Riot understands that most people hate tanks because you can't kill them, and that's frustrating from a player standpoint. So, you know, you don't want an overall tank meta where they squish out other champions to be dominant because people just don't like playing in that. You know, people want to be able to kill things and outplay people and just, like, not have infinite sustain. So that's why they nerfed Cinderhulk and Warmogs, which does help, like, 2-item spikes on something like Sejuani. She was really the main abuser of that, but there are a couple other champions. I mean, Cho, Zac. There were a few champions that could get to the Warmogs. They increased the Warmog amount to 3,000. Just lower the passive healing that you get on that. Just don't make somebody be able to regen like 100% of their health in like 15 seconds or less off of that item, and I think it would be fine. But or nerf the base health on it. Just say, look, if you want insane regen, this item's not going to be that tanky. That's what I would do. But they decided to just raise the minimum on it, 3,000, so it's just going to make the Sejuani and the Zacs get, like, one extra, half an item or something. So it'll slow them down by, like, you know, maybe 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. But anyways, I think we're going to see a rise in more damage-oriented junglers. I mean, even percentage-wise, you're starting to see more of these types of junglers. Like, you're going to see more... And I like, people ask me sometimes, why don't I use op.gg? Because this is the American server, and I think it's more accurate if you're someone playing on America or in Europe, that you look at this rather than the Korean server. Because the Korean server is a completely different beast. Those players are way better on average than Western players. And, you know, that's like trying to look at the NBA to see what you should do for your high school team. Kind of thing, and the strategies are just very different, and the expectations are very different. So, you know, I just like looking at data that's going to tell you about, you know, American or European servers. I think that's just more accurate for how most people watching this channel are probably going to view it. I know we have people from all over the world. You know, I know we have some Chinese fans and some Korean fans and stuff like that. But I just feel like looking at this for the majority of people watching this video is just more accurate. So yeah, you're starting to see more damage junglers like your Warwick, Udyr, Shaco, Shyvana, Kindred. A lot of the press the attack junglers are coming back. Press the attack got a huge buff. It does a little bit more damage from the last patch, and now it does 8% early on. So that, and you know, the Cinderhulk people all just got nerfed. So the press the attack people are definitely coming back into vogue. And enchanters are really good with press the attack, especially Lulu and Janna. Because, you know, when they go in, you can just shield them up and peel them. And Janna's shield gives extra damage, and Lulu gives extra attack speed. So both of those in particular have really nice steroids in scaling, because they give either attack speed or AD, in addition to all of the other disruption that they do. Versus someone like Nami, who has a nice heal, but she doesn't give any attack speed. She doesn't give any AD. Same thing with Karma. Same thing with Sona. So... you know, champions that are doing heavy damage, Lulu and Janna, are going to be excellent with those champs because of the scaling. You know, and I think that Olaf is a sleeper. I've seen him some in my games. I've seen him creep in a couple of times in some pro games. I think this guy's going to blow up once people figure out about him. Definitely in kind of higher elos, but I think even at lower. Not necessarily because of his... buffs on this patch. I think it was kind of a nerf as well on his ult, but because he's so good with Predator and Genius Hunter, and I think people are going to start figuring out about that, and he's so good in a kind of meta that we're dealing with right now with Zyra and Rakan in particular, because Zyra, Rakan, and Anivia, those champions are so toxic, but they have so much CC, and it's so hard to get to them to kill them, that he's really one of the only people that can get through all that crap and get to him. And he can use Righteous Glory really well. So this is kind of the combo that I talked about in my patch notes, where you have Righteous Glory plus Predator plus Ingenious Hunter, And that just gives you a lot of engage, like, over and over again. Because don't forget, Ingenious Hunter lowers the cooldown on Predator. So this will lower your Predator cooldown by 40%. So you can get this to under a minute. So you can constantly run around and just destroy people in the mid-game. And that also lowers the cooldown on your Righteous Glory, which gives you, you know, even more chance. Now, Randuin's is the other one that's really important here that I don't see in these common builds. But Randuin's you can also use once you get close with someone like Olaf. You know, you're going to slow them down off of the Righteous Glory. And then if they manage to live through the first slow, then you can Randuin's and slow them again for an additional 2 seconds. And then you're hitting them with axes and just crushing them in the face. So, and Randuin's also gives you crit reduction. It's minus 20% crit damage. You know who does a lot of crit damage? Virtually every AD carry. Including Zyra. So this right here is what you want against crit champs. You don't want that moving, what is it, the mountain thing or whatever it's called. You don't want that. Like, it's nice. It does give you speed, but you don't need that much speed. You're going to get on them. I'll guarantee you. If you do Righteous Glory plus Predator on Olaf, you're getting on them. Like, they're not going to stop you. And you also get a little speed boost for 1 second when you proc your Ragnarok. But this slows their attack speed if they're hitting you, and it slows them by 55%, and it lowers the critical strike damage by 20%. So this is even more than you would think it is, because it's not just the critical strike bonus damage, it's the total damage on a critical strike by 20%. So that means, you know, if she was going to crit you for 500, and you get 60 armor off of this, let's say that from your other items, well, let's just say 60 off of this, and how much that would reduce the damage. So, you know, she crits you for 400, she normally would do, you know, like 200, so we'll just say she does 400 with Essence Reaver. You know, you would get 20% off of the entire thing. So you'd only be taking 320 off of that, and then you're going to have at least 40 base armor, if not more. Divided by 200, it's going to be 50 times 320. So that would take it down to 160 damage instead of the 400 you're going to take. So this minus 20% off, I'm pretty sure this is off of the entire crit, not just the bonus damage, not just the 200 if they crit you for an additional 200, but the entire 400. So it's twice as good as it looks, I think. Let me see here. Yes. Yes, so it's 40%. You see how this works? So it says it's 20% of the critical strike, but it's not just the critical strike damage, it's the entire damage. So it lowers it from 200% to 160% of the total AD. If the enemy has Infinity Edge, the damage will be 200% of the enemy's AD instead of 250%. So that's how it works. So this is the item you want. You need to be getting this on a lot of champions if you don't want the AD carry to kill you, okay? This is the big ticket anti-crit item. Really, really good. So I think that once you get Cinder Hulk plus Righteous Glory plus Randuin's, and then you have Predator, so you can get on them. You're going to, you know, proc your Righteous. You're going to proc your Randuin's. I just don't see how you don't kill them. It seems to me like against almost anybody, it's impossible because Olaf is going to be immune to crowd control for 5 seconds. So, you know, I think he's really good. And he can run straight through Anivia's stun and her little frozen wall or whatever and just blow her out. Like, you can run around her wall. I just think he's really, really good against these, like, peel comps that just make it very difficult to get on people and kill them. So I think he's definitely a sleeper, and this is germane to supports because Lulu is really good with that, right? Because Lulu boosts him up and can make him get in there even faster, right? And then you can use your ultimate to boost him up even more, knock him up in the air, make him even slower. So she just complements what he's trying to do really well, and that's going to increase his attack speed, and he does a ton of damage when he activates all of his abilities, when he slams his hand on the keyboard and then just walks up and starts autoing. He will start deleting people. And Lulu's really good with a lot of these champions. If you have, You know, someone else who's like the same type of deal would be like Skarner. Now, Skarner doesn't have CC resistance, but it's the same type of thing where you Predator, run at him. Volibear, same deal. Lulu's just very good in that environment, and so is Janna. You know, as a tank, as someone like, you know, Braum or Alistar or something like that, that's not going to complement them as much. Like, yeah, you can engage, but engage is not the problem. They're already going to have good engage. You know, the problem is keeping this person alive while they're doing what they're trying to do. So that's another thing that makes enchanters really good, is they're just really good with these diving bruiser type of people that are going to be using Predator or press the attack. I mean, it's great on Jax too, who jumps in. It's great on Warwick, who jumps in. So enchanters are really good. Because if they run in, you drop all your stuff, your Janna stuff, your Lulu stuff on them, then you drop a redemption on their head, you've got Locket, and you pop Locket. It's really hard to lose the fight. And I already explained the bone plating plus second wind meta. That means that scaling's back because it's a lot harder to kill people in lane. Champions like Nami, champions like Karma are okay in lane, but if you're against somebody who has bone plating and second wind, it's going to be hard to kill them in lane. So you really need to have a scaling enchanter. So that means Janna or Lulu primarily. Okay, so let's go to the tier list. You can probably guess who the top two are going to be, Lulu and Janna. And we'll try to keep this video, I know I say this, it's like, I should make that my t-shirt. I'm going to try to keep this under an hour, like in quotes. That would be a perfect t-shirt for my channel, but we will try. Okay, so let's get into Lulu. I just get so caught up in explaining things and just trying to give you as much depth as possible, and that sometimes I go a bit over, and I'm okay with that, but I am trying to bring the times down a little bit here. I did manage to get my, either the patch notes, I think. The patch notes, one of those was very close to an hour, so that's good. But let's look at Lulu here really quick. If people aren't familiar with Lulu, if you haven't seen her in a while, she's extremely good right now. Very, very good right now. I just described a little bit of why, but Lulu's unique in that she can apply a lot of pressure early on. So that's what's different than Janna. And Lulu didn't see a ton of play last year. You'd see her some, but a lot of that was because she was crowded out by Janna. Well, Janna has had a lot of nerfs, especially to her shield, early game. So Janna is a major liability early game against early aggression. She's great late game, but Lulu is very good early and late. She's just not as safe. But you know what helps keep her safe? Bone plating and second wind. So that has helped her out tremendously. And now you can go things like, you know, Ninja Tabi, Mercury Treads, stuff like that, and then get Transcendence with her, and still hit that CDR cap pretty early if you have to. So I think that just gives her a whole lot more protection, especially in lane with bone plating, and it gives her really good sustain, which is something that historically she just doesn't have in lane, because now you've got second wind. So I think those two runes benefit her more than almost any other enchanter, because those historically have been things that she's weak against, which is all-in pressure, pre-6, and poke damage. Because historically, you know, she's been beaten up by Nami, Sona, and then Janna could keep up with her in lane. But Sona received a ton of nerfs early on in the season. She outscales Nami. She can keep up with Nami, but bone plating and second wind will allow her to survive the laning phase against Nami. And then Janna, you can pressure Janna out early, and you can scale just as hard, if not harder. I would say that she's probably better with these dive people than Janna is, because her ultimate, you can just press on somebody and boom, there's that infusion of health, and it slows, it allows the champions to stick to people, right? It lets that Olaf stick to somebody, or that Volibear stick to somebody, because her ultimate slows people down by quite a bit, you know, 30, 45, 60, and it's on a much lower cooldown. Whereas Janna really is more of a peeler. Like, she's good if you have people running into you, because her ult knocks people back. We'll talk about Janna here in a second. Her ult knocks people back, and you need to channel it. But that's not as good if your team's just, like, running forward as fast as possible, trying to engage and kill somebody. So they're both really good, but Lulu is just a much more aggressive Janna. And so she's kind of slow. She only has 330 move speed. That's something that's really rough with her, and she has very low HP. Also, being able to go to the Resolve tree now gives you an extra 65 HP early, which is awesome. So she scales pretty well. Her picks, and people forget about this with her, This gives extra on-hit damage, effectively. So every time you put your picks on somebody and they auto-attack, they do extra on-hit damage. Now, let me just put this in perspective for you. As far as I understand with Varus, Varus doesn't typically trigger his blight stacks when he's in a fight. He does it some, but a lot of his damage just comes from the straight-up 26 bonus on-hit damage. So this is 26 damage, and that's what allows him to just sit there and just like machine gun kill people. Now, some of that is Ginsu's also does on-hit damage and, you know, triggers the on-hit several times. But, you know, Varus can just feel like he's just completely melting people with Ginsu's plus Hurricane because of this on-hit damage that he does, right? So if we take a look at old Lulu here, what was that, 26 on-hit damage? Let's try level 11, 75 on-hit damage. So this complements people, especially Ginsu users, very, very well. Okay, like anyone who's going to be stacking a ton of attack speed, this is awesome. So people forget that. You put the shield on them, and they do a lot of extra on-hit damage. And then if you also whimsy them, that's going to give them a ton of extra attack speed, you know, up to 45% attack speed, and it gives them a lot of move speed to either kite or chase people down. So that's really sweet, especially combined with picks, especially on, you know, someone who's going to be an attack speed, you know, user. So Ginsu's or Hurricane, you know, someone like Twitch, you know, her best people that she gets paired with are Kog'Maw and Twitch, because they have such powerful on-hit interactions with the poison stacking with Twitch and Kog'Maw's W active. So yeah, Ginsu's going to get nerfed probably next patch, and it's probably going to make those champs kind of bad. We'll see how it shakes out, but Lulu will still be really good, especially for people who want attack speed. Now, she's not as good with someone like Jin or Miss Fortune. They'd rather have the raw AD from someone like Janna. The extra attack speed is nice. You know what else is good with attack speed? Ardent Sensor, because that's going to give you even more on-hit damage, and it's going to give you even more attack speed to trigger your picks even more, and to trigger your Hurricane and your Ginsu's and all that stuff. So she just synergizes so well with Ardent Sensor and anyone who gets Ginsu's or has special stacking abilities. That it's just great. And this Whimsy doubles as a polymorph. So this is not quite a stun, but it's pretty close for 2.25 seconds. That's almost the length of a Malzahar ult. I'm sure all of you have been polymorphed before, and that is extremely frustrating to deal with. That's insane. That's so good. So this just like completely takes a dump on assassins, right? Like you have that Riven running at you, no problem. She didn't get a Quicksilver Sash, she's done. You know, or Camille, or, you know, Talon, or Echo. You know what? Echo can't really ult when he's polymorphed. So this just crushes a lot of champions. Whimsy is really, really strong. I mean, it's one of the most powerful abilities in the game, I would say. Now, the problem historically with Lulu is that you only have one Whimsy, right, that you can use every, like, 7 seconds. So you have to choose, are you going to polymorph your ally? Are you going to speed up your Olaf to engage? Or are you going to give that extra attack speed to your Zyra? So it has 3 different modes, but that's the challenge of Lulu, is you have to choose which one do you really want to do. But that is usually a good problem to have when an ability is so strong that, you know, the biggest decision, like the hardest thing, is figuring out just how you want to use this super strong ability. Her Q early on is decent damage. I mean, it's 80 flat damage. Has okay wave clear. It's not amazing. It's all right. And it's pretty cheap. It's like 50 mana. So people used to get like 3 points of this in lane. I wouldn't do that anymore. It's okay. You can do that if you want more harass, but I think it's better to start maxing out your help picks. This shield now, it used to be a pretty low shield. You know, Janna's used to be 240, but now Janna's is only 210. And this is also 210. So it's very similar to Janna, but a big difference is you can actually deal damage to the enemies, and it's a point click. It has low range. It's only 650 range, but this is really good for harassing the enemy. You just walk up, hit them with your E, auto attack them, hit them with your Q, walk away, and that's going to be, you know, like a third of their health early on. So that's really good, especially if you want to itemize into Ardent Sensor early. That means you can get an Amp Tome, and then this is going to deal even more damage. So this is great because it doubles as something early on that you can spam for harass, and it transitions really well into the mid game as a shield to help protect your carries. So, you know, with Janna, you have to choose, are you going to get your shield for the kind of the mid-game power, late-game power, or are you going to get your W for the early-game harassment? With this, you get it both just by leveling up your shield. So, you know, the caveat there is Janna's shield also gives AD, so that also has the steroid on it, which is different. And it has 800 range, where Lulu's only has 650. So Lulu is a little bit more dangerous when she has to shield her allies. Then, of course, Wild Growth. You know, everybody knows what this does. It gives an infusion of health. A big part about this is it gets around Executioner's Calling, okay, or Ignite or whatever, because it's just an infusion of health. It's not a heal, so you don't get anything from like bonus healing and shielding here. All that you get is this infusion of health. So it's good in some sense that it gets around grievous wounds types of effects, but it's also kind of bad in another sense that it doesn't scale with Redemption or Mikhail's or anything like that. So it's useful to think about. Now, keep in mind that, you know, this, you can overheal this too. Okay, so like with a normal heal, you don't want to overheal somebody. So if someone's at full health, you don't want to heal them. But with this, it's okay because it gives them that extra health for 7 seconds. So if your Olaf is running in, it's okay to use this to knock people up with it, because they're going to do 300 damage to him at some point over the next 7 seconds. You don't have to wait until someone's really low to do this, right? If it's someone who's engaging, you can use it for crowd control just to knock people up for 1 second and put that slow on them. So, you know, once again, this has multiple uses. You can wait until someone's low and use it, or you can just go ahead and use it on the person who's engaging to enhance that engage. So that's something else, once again, that makes her a little bit different from Janna, is that she's way better with, like, dive and engage champions. Okay. So, you know, really, really good kit. Excellent against assassins. Excellent scaling with AD carries. Excellent with divers. There's really very little wrong with her, other than the fact that she can get bullied out early by other enchanters that have a heal, but bone plating and second wind helps with that. And she's really slow, so she can get caught out and assassinated in the mid game. You can speed yourself up with Whimsy, but you know, she's a little bit more vulnerable than some of the other champions. We'll just put it that way, but very, very strong. Okay, so the runes that I recommend with Lulu are, got them pulled up here, and you can always find these runes in the description as well. If you just go into the Google Doc, I have a another little mini Google Doc for each one of these champions. If you just click on it, and it'll tell you the runes that I recommend for them. I updated all of them through tier 3. I didn't really mess with the tier 4s. I didn't have time today. I want to try to get this out before the stream, which is not going to happen, but at least I can film it before the stream. But yeah, you can go in there and see the runes that I recommend anytime in that Google Doc. Okay, so Lulu, you want to go Airy, Mana Flow Band, Celerity, Scorch, and then Bone Plating and Second Wind. Okay, so Airy gives you excellent sort of harassment early on. It also doubles later on as giving you extra shields, which are nice. So Airy's kind of a no-brainer here. Mana Flow Band is really good. Just gives you a lot more harassment early on. You're not typically going to get a tier, so having the extra mana is nice. Either Celerity, I actually kind of like Transcendence. It depends on what you want. Transcendence, having that extra 10% CDR later on is really nice. If you happen to go over the CDR cap, it's fine. You get extra AP out of it. Your move speed is going to be a bit slower. You know, you're going to lose about 10, 11 move speed out of it. So it's up to you. If you think they're going to be running you down a lot, maybe you keep Celerity. But Transcendence is a really nice perk if you can afford to get it. Scorch, you're going to be doing a lot of harassing early, so that's good. And then Bone Plating, Second Wind. You can do Font of Life if they don't have a lot of assassins, and you have a lot of people that are going to be able to benefit from Ardent Censor. You can do Font of Life, and what that's going to do is when you slow people with your Q, or when people get slowed by your R, I'm not sure about that one, because you're enchanting someone else with that. When you slow someone with your Q or you polymorph them and anyone else attacks them, then your whole team is going to be able to get the Ardent Censor buff, which is really helpful, instead of just the one person that you shield. So Font of Life situationally can be good, but Bone Plating is extremely powerful, so I get Bone Plating most of the time. Boots, Ionian is greedy. If you don't really feel threatened or you're snowballing really hard, you can go Ionian. You might have to get Ninja Tabi or Merc Treads, depending on, who's doing what in the game. If they have a fed AP Assassin, for example, you're probably going to have to get Merc Treads, or if their, Vayne is 5-0, you know, you might have to get Ninja Tabi, but, you know, you just kind of have to feel it out. Eye of the Watchers, you want to do that. You're going to be harassing a lot early. You want the extra damage. And then I would get Ardent Censor probably first. Then kind of feel it out from there. You can get Redemption if you want, or you could even get Athene's if you want to go for that, which will give you even more damage and scaling. And that Athene's has particularly good synergy with Font of Life and Ardent Censor. But Redemption's also pretty good. I say that Redemption and Mikhail's aren't as strong on Lulu because your only thing that's going to benefit from that is your E, which is nice, but your ult doesn't benefit from that. So you only have one spell that benefits from the healing and shielding, so it's okay, but that makes me, you know, think about Ardent Censor and Athene's a little bit more on Lulu than I would on Janna. Okay, speaking of Janna, let's go ahead and transition to talk about Janna. So I think Lulu's number one now, primarily because she has excellent early game harass and really good late game scaling. And, you know, like I keep saying, Second Wind and Bone Plating really solve a lot of her early game problems when she's against other enchanters that can out harass her, that have a heal, like Nami, Sona, those type of champs. Okay. Let's look at Janna here really quickly. Now, I get into a debate every time on stream, every single time. If you watch my stream, people will always say, why aren't you maxing W? Or why aren't you going Spell Thieves? Or whatever on Janna. So I'm going to talk about it again here. I've talked about it in past videos, but we'll do it again. So that I can tell people just look at the newest, you know, tier list and I explain it. Okay, let me explain the history of why people started maxing W first on Janna. Let me see. There might be some pros that still max it. Even if they do, I'm going to disagree with that. And I'm going to explain why. I'm not a pro parrot. If you've never seen my channel, I don't always agree with doing whatever the pros do. And the main reason for that is, yes, pros are very smart at being pros. Okay, so they are playing in a different kind of game. And what I mean by that is games are much faster, they're much better organized, and things like the laning phase are much more important in pro level play because the enemy will snowball any advantage that you give them and close out the game. In solo queue, when you're lower than challenger, especially, you know, once you go below diamond, you start getting into plat and lower, people are not going to punish you that much for the laning phase. The laning phase is nice, but it doesn't matter as much as the mid and the late game usually, because that's really when games are won off of really bad macro rather than getting completely stomped out in lane. There's so many times where you can, you know, just kind of go even or average in lane and take over the game in the mid and the late game if you have the right itemization runes and champion. Now, that's not to say that the laning phase doesn't matter. Of course it does. But I'm just saying that there are different kinds of considerations and constraints in a challenger or pro level meta than there are in solo queue. Think about it this way as well. You know, if you've ever seen boosters, and I'm sure you probably have in your game, or if you don't know what that is, that's people that you pay money and they will boost your account. Okay, so they will play games on your account at a really high win rate and get you to wherever you want to be for a hefty price, depending on, you know, what you want to do. And there are sites out here, you know, and I'm not condoning this. You know, it's sites like this: Elo Boost, Elo Train, GG Boost, EloBoost.net, EloBoost.com. You know, this is a real thing that you can get. Now, I'm going to tell you, don't ever do this for several reasons. Number one, it's a security threat, okay? So that means that you're having to give these people credit card information. These are already nefarious people for the most part. They're already doing something that's shady. And so you don't know what's going to happen with your info. Okay, so that's number one. I'd say, in general, you need to be very careful with dealing with shady people. Just that are doing stuff, you know, backdoor, you know, breaking certain rules or laws. Not saying everyone's bad that does that. I'm just saying you're opening yourself up to a population that's not afraid to break some rules. Another thing is your account can get found out and banned, and it often does. It's really easy to detect this kind of stuff. You know, when someone just randomly goes like 90% on Zed over 30 games when they never played Zed in their life on their account, Riot can spot this stuff and ban you out. Okay? So, don't boost. But my point that I'm making here is that there are certain champions that players will use to boost in lower elos. Okay, so even high level, like challenger type of players, will play different champions in silver and gold than they will at the top, right? So they're going to play things like Pantheon. They're going to play stuff like Master Yi, great booster champion. They might play stuff like Riven. You know, they might play stuff like Yasuo. They're going to play a different style of champion at lower elo. Whereas in their challenger account, you know, sure, they might play Sion top. Sure, they might play, you know, Orianna middle, or, you know, just something else that's going to be a bit more utility or tank or whatever. But when they're boosting, when they're trying to boost an account, they're going to play different types of champions and have a different playstyle. And the main takeaway from that is high elo, not the same as low elo. Okay, so people make that mistake all the time on YouTube and say, well, look at what the top Koreans are doing. Look at what this challenger level, you know, person is doing here. You should do that too in your silver games. No, you shouldn't, right? Like, maybe, I mean, maybe it's a good idea, but you need to think carefully about it. Don't just accept it without thinking about it. And so that's my argument. You know, for a lot of people say, but I saw this challenger building this way, or I saw this other person building this way. I'm like, that's great. Are you a challenger? No? Okay, then maybe you should do something different, right? So it's not to say that challengers aren't smart. They don't know what they're doing. They obviously do. It's just that it's different in lower elos. There are a lot of different things about it. I've made videos about this in the past. And they know this. That's why they do different stuff when they boost or when they make a Smurf account. If you watch any of these, like, you know, level 30 to challenger or, you know, unranked to diamond accounts, they play different stuff than they would if they were in challenger. Okay, so anyways, that's all of my aside before I preface and get into the Janna here, okay? So, the history of the Janna W Max came about right after Janna's shield got nerfed a lot, when poke was super important and Aerie was overpowered early on in the preseason. People switched to running Janna with W. I'm pretty sure the W had a much higher ratio, or like her passive had a higher ratio, or something like that when people were doing this. Yeah, that had a much higher ratio. They just nerfed this. Zephyr mana cost was much cheaper. Okay, they just nerfed it here to where it's slow was reduced. Range is reduced. Okay, so anyways, this got changed a lot, and stuff like Scorch, Aerie, Celerity, all of this stuff was much, much stronger earlier in the preseason, and so people switched over to going W on Janna because you had to win the early game. That's all that mattered. You weren't going to scale to get to late because games were over in, like, you know, 25 or less minutes. It was just a super, super aggressive meta earlier in the preseason. And so you had to do that out of necessity because you weren't going to get to a mid game. You weren't going to get to a late game. You know, people were dying 5 times in lane because everything was dealing way too much damage in the preseason. And that's why people switched over to Zephyr, okay? But it's different now, okay? A lot of that stuff has been dialed back. You know, the sorcery tree has been nerfed numerous times. And it's just a different world that we live in. So is this okay to get some points in this? Sure, it does do some damage, okay? But Aerie has been nerfed. Scorch has been nerfed. The range has been nerfed on this. So this is a lot riskier to do this. When you get into 550 range, you're opening yourself up to stuff, right? You're opening yourself up to Alistar engaging on you. You're opening yourself up to Leona engaging. You're opening yourself up to Lulu comboing you. Or like Nami comboing you or bubbling you. Or Zyra hitting you with her roots. So there's a lot of stuff here. It's a lot more dangerous, and there's a lot less payoff to doing this. Also, they have nerfed this a lot. And the biggest nerf here is the cooldown. This is really, really big. So this scales super hard now. Like, it already scaled hard, but because they nerfed the cooldown on it, it scales even harder. So every point that you get in your shield is a 2-second reduction. It's an extra, 35 shield, and it's an extra 7.5 AD. People forget about this. Your shield does damage, okay? At 40 damage, I've done this before in past videos. Let's say you put this on your AD carry and they attack, 5 times, okay? And let's say that they have, 40% crit. We'll say 30% crit. Okay, so they've completed their, static shiv, rapid fire cannon, or whatever. Let's say they have, let's say 35% crit, okay? We'll say they don't have an Infinity Edge yet. So, that means that out of 5 attacks, we'll just call it 2 extra attacks to make it even, okay? So, crit equals an extra attack, so that means they're going to hit 7 times. So in 5 seconds, we'll say they hit 7 times, okay? That's 280 damage. All right, when this is maxed out. It's 280 damage when you put it on an 80 carry that just has, like, they can just get off the equivalent of 5 attacks with 2 crits in 5 seconds, which is not that much. Okay? What's this damage? 280 damage. Okay? It's the same damage. It does the exact same damage. In a very common scenario that I just described, it is the exact same damage. But you know what? This actually scales, because once they get Infinity Edge, it's even more than that. Once they get even more attack speed, once they're able to attack 8 or 9 times, and they're critting like 50% of those. So if they attack 8 times and crit on, 50% of those, that's 12 attacks. Now all of a sudden it's 480 damage, and that Infinity Edge is going to add even more to that. It's going to add an extra 50% onto that, so it's like an extra 2 attacks. So what I say, 12? It's really closer to 14 when they have Infinity Edge. Okay, it's 560 damage. So now it's dealing, like double the damage. Once that 80 carry gets 2 items. Once they get Infinity Edge plus whatever their Zeal item is, this is getting even closer to, almost double the damage of your W, right? And it shields for 210. And it can deal damage to towers. Your W, you can't W a tower. People can auto-attack towers, though, and the extra AD on their autos does damage towers. This allows you to push towers much faster. So you're not only going to be dealing more damage in the mid-game with this, but you're also going to be shielding a lot with this, and you're going to be able to do it a lot more often, right? So you're going to be able to do this like almost twice as much, from 18 seconds down to 10 seconds. This has no cooldown reduction on it. It's always 8 seconds. So you're not really getting a benefit out of that. And any AP that you get is going to give even more AD, so it's going to make your shield even bigger, and it's going to make the AD bigger. So if you get 100 AP off of like Ardent Sensor and just, some other random stuff, then this is going to be even bigger. Okay? This only has a 0.5 AP ratio. Now, yeah, it does slow a little bit more. Sure, it slows. It does give you like a marginal amount of extra movement speed. That's nice. This is why you play Janna. This is so much bigger. It does just as much damage in the mid game, and it does way more in the late game if you're just worried about damage. And the shield is so strong, especially on this kind of cooldown. It's 800 range, so you can do this much safer. You're not going to be able to walk up to the Anivia and press W on her in the mid-game at 550 range. You're not going to be able to walk up to that 3-item Vayne and press W on her. But you can shield the Olaf running in. You can shield your Vayne, who's going to be able to auto-attack the, the Olaf that's diving her. So this is so much better. This is far, far better now, okay? This was a very specific meta. And yeah, like right now, if you max your W, yeah, sure, you're going to have maybe a bit more pressure in the first 5 minutes of the lane, but then you're going to be worthless in the mid game because you're going to have an 18-second shield that's going to bust at 70 damage, that's only going to provide 10 AD. I mean, you're basically punching your AD carry in the face and taking a BF sword from them. This is 40 AD. It's giving them a BF sword when you have this, in addition to this kind of shield. So you're robbing your AD carry of their mid lane power just so that you can, like, take a couple of extra risks and maybe poke somebody out. They're going to have second wind. They're going to have bone plating. Like, you're not poking them out as Janna. Okay? So, don't max W in lane. You can get 1 or 2 point, you have to get 1 point. Like, you can maybe go 2. Maybe if you're feeling really crazy, you could go 3 points in W if you're shattering them. If you're, like, Draven Janna against, like, I don't know, Ezreal and someone who went AFK, like, yeah, maybe you could get 3 points in Zephyr, but, in general, you are trading your mid game, which is Janna's strongest, her mid and her late game. You're trading what you're best at for something that you're really average to not that great at. And for me, that's just not a good trade. For similar reasons, don't get Spell Thieves. Okay, Spell Thieves looks nice. It's like, oh, I do a little bit of extra damage when I auto attack in Zephyr. True, but you're losing a lot of gold. I mean, if you just stop and look at how much gold you get off of Frostfang at around 30 minutes, and then look and see how much gold you have off of Coin at around 30 minutes, it's going to be a difference of like 1,200 gold or more, like 4 kills worth of gold. Coin is way better. And the reason is you can't poke or trigger this after you get out of lane. So after 10 minutes, you're basically getting 2 gold per 10 because you're not going to be able to walk up and Zephyr people or auto attack people. You have no true poke here. So you're just losing out on all of that gold once again to get a very small incremental advantage in lane. And it's not worth it. Just go Coin, max your shield, scale up, get your redemption, get your ardent sensor, and just win the game. Like, I don't know. Like, people just want to argue about this all the time in lane, and I just, you know, debate it, and, you know, no one's ever, like, concedes that point. They're like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, maybe there are some people, but I don't know. Everybody just feels like they have to max W on Janna, and I don't understand it. It's, like, very simple reasoning. At least to me, it seems simple. It's like, do you want to be stronger for 5 minutes, or do you want to be stronger for the next 30 minutes? In a solo queue, you know, whatever elo range someone's in, gold, silver, you know, platinum. To me, it's an easy grand slam to be stronger in the mid to late game. But anyways, so this is the power of Janna. Like, she has this scaling. This extra AD is a really big deal. It's a lot of extra damage for someone like Vayne or Zyra or whomever for your AD carry. You get a ton of extra damage. It has really nice scaling, really good protection. You know, Zephyr allows you to zip around the map, place wards quickly, you know, slow people down, kite them. Your Tornado stops lots of movement, like Zac engages, Lee Sin jumps, Rengar jumps, Kha'Zix jumps. Anyone that has movement, your Tornado can help stop that. So that's really nice. That also doubles up as, like, some kind of decent wave clear if the lane is empty. You can also shield towers, which doesn't come up all the time, but it is pretty nice for holding up some of those towers in sieges. It can definitely keep them up. And then this ultimate is just ridiculous. It's so good. It pushes everybody back, just resets the fight, and heals everybody up basically to full with just insane scaling on it. I mean, it heals people for 600 with an extra 150% AP. So, you know, in a fight, if a fight's breaking out, you just drop a shield on somebody, drop your redemption, press lock it, press monsoon, and your team's basically invulnerable for like 5 seconds, pretty much. And everybody gets healed to full. Like, it's just really hard to lose a team fight once you get, you know, redemption plus your level 2 monsoon, and then if you get lock it or something like that, it's just really hard to lose. So that's what makes Janna really good. The only reason that I have her at number 2 instead of number 1 is just because Lulu is much better with divers, and Lulu is able to apply more pressure early on. If you want to do the W's thing, if you want to, like, you know, get Spell Thieves and go W on Zephyr, just play Lulu. Just play Lulu. Lulu's way better at that, because she can get a shield in the early game, which is also one of her best spells in the mid game, and it doubles as damage and a shield on her E. So you can comfortably get 3 or 4 points in your shield without sacrificing your mid game. That's the big difference, is you can apply pressure early, and that same skill also transitions to be good in the mid, and then you're covered late with your Whimsy, with your W. So Lulu's just going to be way, way better at doing that type of game than Janna is. So those are my thoughts on it. All right, well, this is taking longer than I thought, of course, but we'll move on. Okay, Rakan, and then on Janna, another thing that, you know, is different from me, from a lot of other people, is I'm going to recommend Guardian, Font of Life, or you can go Bone Plating if you're against an all-in lane. Guardian, Font of Life, second win, Revitalize, Zombie Ward, and Genius Hunter. The reason for this is you almost always go 2 actives on Janna. You know, you'll go Redemption and Locket or Redemption Mikhail's. She scales much better with plus healing and shielding than Lulu does, because her ult and her shield benefit from that stat. So you can comfortably get a Mikhail's a lot better, and you're going to have a lot better scaling on Redemption. So Redemption Mikhail's is a really strong combo on her. She can still do Ardent Sensor if you want to. But But I would still go Zombie and Ingenious. Revitalize, very good on her. For the same reasons. You know, she has a lot of healing and shielding. Revitalize also scales with Redemption and Locket. It gives them more healing and shielding, so that's really good. Font of Life, you know, if you think you're going to go Ardent Sensor, Font of Life is a good choice, but Bone Plating is also pretty legit. And then Guardian is actually quite good on her. It helps protect you. It helps protect your ally. You can go Airy, if you want to. You know, you can go Airy, you know, Airy, Mana Flow Band, Celerity, and Scorch. Once again, you're not going to be using Scorch. You're not gonna do enough damage for Scorch to matter in the laning phase. You don't have mana problems, so you don't need Mana Flow because you're primarily a reactive champion with most of your spells outside of your W and autos. And you're already really fast, so Celerity doesn't matter. So Airy is good, definitely. Airy's very good, and it scales good, you know, for the later in the game. But if you go Sorcery, then you're going to miss out on Second Wind and Bone Plating, or Second Wind and Font of Life, because you're going to have to get Zombie and Ingenious. You know, if you go Sorcery and then just go Second Wind plus Bone Plating, you're going to be missing out on Ingenious and Zombie, and she's so good with that because she can kill wards so easily because she's so fast and safe, and Ingenious is going to give you a lot more power behind your Redemption and Locket or Redemption and Mikhail's. So if you go Airy, you're going to have to give this up most likely. And I don't think Airy is worth Zombie and Ingenious, especially because the other three things, you don't need them that much, whereas all three of these are really good on her. So that's why I go for these runes on Janna, even though I know I'm in the minority. You're not going to see a lot of pros doing that. You know, that's what I recommend, and that's my reasoning, is because all of these are good, and the stuff in Sorcery is not as good, and I want to make sure that I can get Zombie and Ingenious. And you really, really need Second Wind and either Bone Plating or Font of Life to keep up in this meta right now. Now, you can give up, you might be thinking, but why do you give up Zombie and Ingenious on Lulu then? The reason for that is Lulu isn't as good with Redemption and Mikhail's. She's not going to get as many actives because she only has one shield on her E. Okay, so she doesn't have as much scaling, so it's very rare to get Mikhail's on Lulu unless it's like Code Red, you know, Ashe keeps killing everybody with her arrows. Then you can get Mikhail's. But on Janna, you just want to get Mikhail's anyways most of the time, even if they don't have a ton of CC, because that extra 20% healing and shielding is massive. So that's why. It's because you have to be thinking, in your first two items, is there a pretty strong chance you're going to get two actives? If the answer is yes, you really want a Genius Hunter. If the answer is no, if you're probably going to get Ardent as one of your two items, then you may not want to get it. You can get Ardent on Janna, but it's nice to have the option of getting Mikhail's if you need it, and having that Ingenious is really good. So that's my reasoning there. If it's a champ that doesn't scale that well with plus healing and shielding, and you're probably just going to go Ardent, you know, early, then you may not need Ingenious, and you can get away with going something like Airy. Once again, Lulu's going to leverage Airy a lot more in Scorch because she's going to apply more pressure as well. So this is specifically a Janna thing where, you know, I don't think she applies enough pressure to warrant going Airy to the exclusion of Ingenious, which is going to be really good with most items she's commonly going to get. So, okay, there's my Janna, there's my Lulu. I just spent probably, you know, 30 minutes talking about Janna. For anyone that's curious, now, you know, I've got it for them once again, so we can reference that so I don't have to talk about it for, you know, 40 minutes every stream. Okay. Rakan. So I have Rakan this high. This is going to be higher than a lot of other people put him. And the reason is Zyra's an extremely good AD carry right now. She's arguably the best AD carry on this patch because everyone else has been nerfed so much. I don't think there's as much of a gap as some of the other tier lists are saying. You know, I think that Twitch is still really good. I think that Jinx is really good. I think that Tristana is really good. So yes, Zyra's really good. She's probably number one, but I think that, you know, Tristana, Jinx are not really that far behind for solo queue. And Rakan is also, if your team needs engage, which does happen in this meta right now, you know, you'll have someone like a Kha'Zix in the jungle and top lane, you know, you might have a Camille or a Riven or something, and somebody just needs to be able to start a fight because there's going to be a lot less tanks that start fights running around. There will be some. But having somebody who can start a fight is really nice. And Rakan is the best version of that right now because he's also an enchanter. And so, yeah, I'm not going to go full into the Rakan. What's up?
I still have to jump the Lexus unless we're going to share your karma.
That right, Rory? Yeah. You want to show up on camera, Rory? She's smiling. Are you smiling, Rory? You having fun? Are you having fun? She's like, why am I over here? Look, Rory. Yeah. Do, 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 do.
Are you waving?
She's waving.
Waving? Waving?
Wee, she's flying.
Hi. Hi.
Okay.
So
I have to finish this video. We'll see.
when will we be done?
I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes, something like that.
Okay, because we really shouldn't leave her in the house. So we just take her with us. She needs to go to bed.
We'll figure it out. I mean, if I have to, I can just drive you tomorrow. It's fine.
So
Yeah.
I need a car tomorrow work.
Okay, we'll figure it out in a second.
Okay, hurry up.
So anyways, Rakan, where? Rakan has a pretty bad laning phase if he doesn't have Zyra, because this Quill thing is really hard to hit consistently. It has a very slender hitbox. It gets blocked by minions. It's just easy for people to dodge, and you don't really get that rewarded for hitting people unless you level this up a lot. Do not level this up. It doesn't increase the healing at all. It does lower the cooldown, which is nice. It gives you a marginal amount of extra damage, but you're just sacrificing too much, kind of like with Janna. It just has virtually no utility in the mid to late game. You're not going to be running up and trying to like poke the Anivia or poke the AD carry with this. So it just has very, very limited uses because the healing doesn't scale either. It scales based on level, not based on how many points you have in it. So you really, really should not be doing this. I've seen some pro players get like 3 points in this, like Smoothie watching his stream. And I sat there and watched, and he only landed like maybe 1 or 2 Qs in the laning phase, period. And he put like 3 points in this. And I'm just like there's no point. There's no point in leveling this up unless you're hitting like over half of your Qs and you're just spamming this in the lane. It's not going to matter, especially when the enemy is going to have, you know, second wind and bone plating. You're not doing damage to them. They're just going to heal right through it. So, yeah, I think that do not level that all the way up. Now, this is a choice, getting the W or getting the E. I recommend maxing the W because it gives you a lot more movement speed around the map. It allows you to zip over walls and get to hot situations. It also allows you to ward deep in the enemy jungle and then get away safely a lot of the time. And it's just your crowd control. You know, in a fight, if you get 1 extra grand entrance off, if you get 1 extra knock up on that, you know, person chasing your AD carry, that can be huge. I mean, that can decide the entire fight. So that's why I favor the W. This is really nice. This is your shield, and it's a very good shield. The 150 looks pretty anemic, but don't forget you get 2 of them. So that's up to the 300 shield with a 1.6 AP ratio. That is big. So that's a really big shield, and this is also your mobility around a fight. So this allows you to zip around and dodge things in a fight. You can heal multiple people, put Ardent Sensor on multiple people. So, you know, there's definitely an argument for having this. It will give your people better shielding and protection in fights, but it won't be as much crowd control, and it won't allow you to zip around the map as fast, because you can't use this to jump over walls. You can use this to jump over walls and get places. So, you know, I prefer Grand Entrance, but you know, I can definitely see the argument for Battle Dance. And then Quickness, of course, is excellent for engaging in fights. I have an entire Rakan guide for Season 8. Just be sure to check that out on the main channel if you want. A couple of things to keep in mind for Quickness. You know, it's better if you can tag them with Quickness first and then use Grand Entrance to knock them up. That's not always how you're going to be able to do it, but then you're getting the Charm for 1 second and then the knock up for an additional second. So that's 2 full seconds of CC. Whereas if you Quickness and then W onto them, you're only going to be getting like 1.25 seconds worth of CC. Or maybe like 1.5 seconds, you know. So yeah, it does pause for 1 second and then knocks them up. So you get a little bit more if you R them first and then W them. But most of the time you're going to RW. However, when you're jumping around, when you have your Quickness on, if you E to somebody and you pass over somebody else, that will also charm them. So, for example, if you RWN and then you E back to the Zyra, Like maybe she's at a different angle, so you RW in a straight line, and then she's kind of off to the side, and you E to the side. Anyone that you pass over while you're Eing towards somebody also gets quickness CC'd. Just keep that in mind, that you can zip around with your E also and potentially charm a bunch more people in a fight. You don't have to just walk over them or E onto them. You can also E around, or W onto them. You can also E around and make that happen. So he has a pretty trash laning phase. You have to be careful. You can get completely abused by something like a Zyra or a Lulu or, you know, something like that in the laning phase. But if you have Zaya, or you have someone else who's aggressive that can definitely get some kills, especially like a Varus at level 6, then that can be pretty good. Also, Jinx is pretty good. She can put the chompers down when you knock somebody up. So he's the best engaged champion right now, I think, because he scales really well with plus healing and shielding, because the shield has a 1.6 ratio on it, and plus healing and shielding also applies to your Q, and it also applies to the shield that you get off of your passive. So you have triple scaling on this. So that's really nice. So he can comfortably get a ton of different items. You know, he can get Ardent Censer, he can get Redemption, Locket. I mean, he could even get Banner of Command is pretty good on him. I've been advocating that for a while because he can zip around the map and place it in a side lane and then get back to your allies pretty quickly because of maxing Grand Entrance. So that's a decent thing. It also gives you some more tankiness, so you don't get one-shotted when you jump in. You can get Zeke's on him if you want, because he has a really low cooldown ult, and he's already going to be pretty close to people when he ults a lot of times. So you can get some benefit out of that Zeke's passive, the little Ice Storm. And then if you have Ardent Censer plus Zeke's, the extra attack speed off of Ardent Censer and the on-hit damage combines really well with the Zeke's 50% on-hit damage that you get. So Ardent Censer plus Zeke's is a very good 1-2 punch for buffing up an 80 carry who's super fed. Like if you have a 5-0 Twitch, that's a really good combination that you can get on Rakan that you can't get on a lot of other champions out there. So that's a pretty good choice. So he has a lot of different ways that you can build him. So he's extremely versatile in his build, and he's versatile in his playstyle. He can be a peeler, but primarily he's used as an engage. So Rakan, really, really strong. You just have to make sure you're not going to get bulldozed in lane if the enemy has really good presence. Now, he's also pretty versatile in his runes. You know, a more traditional build would be something like Guardian plus Bone Plating plus Second Wind, Revitalize. Great scaling, especially if you're going to go with the Redemption plus Locket build. Zombie Warden and Genius Hunter, also really good because there are a lot of different actives you can get. You know, like I said before, you can get Redemption, you can get Locket, you can get Banner of Command. You can get Righteous Glory to help you engage. All of these things are great with Ingenious Hunter. Another build that's really situational that you could try out would be something like Predator, Taste of Blood, Zombie, Ingenious, Bone Plating, and Second Wind. This would be triple regeneration off of Taste of Blood, Bone Plating, and Second Wind, so that's really good. And then Predator, if they have an immobile champion mid lane, is excellent. It's going to benefit from Ingenious Hunter, so you're going to get that down to less than a 1-minute cooldown a lot of the time. And just being able to Predator in, and then, you know, every time your ult's up pretty much and make a play is really strong. So if they have something like a Diana or a Brand or maybe even a Nivea, just anything that's going to be sitting mid lane that doesn't have a very good escape, you can definitely abuse that really well with Predator. Or if you're against a bot lane that doesn't have a lot of escapes. So if you're against like a Sona, Sona Jinx or something like that, you can easily come running up the lane with Predator and make some really good ganks. So yeah, that's a decent but situational build. You need to make sure you're going to be able to roam and make plays with that Predator, because you're giving up a lot of protection off of Guardian. But this is pretty good. Taste of Blood is a little weird, but if you can hit a Q like every 20 seconds or so, it's pretty decent. And recommended items, you probably want to go Ionian, maybe Mobility. You might have to get Ninja Tabi or Mercs, depending on what they have. Watcher, Redemption, Locket, Mikhail, Ardent Censer. Like I said, you could also go Banner or Zeke's. You can build almost anything on him. Just be sure to watch the Rakan guide on the channel. I talk about all sorts of different situations where you might want different items, but I think he's really strong right now. Even if you don't have Zaya, obviously he's good with Zaya, but even if you don't have Zaya and your team needs more engage, especially if you have a lane-dominant champion, you know, like a Jhin or, you know, Misfortune or just something like that that's not going to get completely bulldozed if you pick Rakan, that can be a pretty good option. We'll speed it up here because my wife wants me to go help her jump this car. But Nami's someone who has risen up to power here recently. She's good against Lulu to an extent. Lulu's going to out... Like, you have to be super, super aggressive because Lulu is going to out-scale her hard. Especially if the Lulu's not going to go bone plating her second win. But you can't know that when you're picking Nami. But Nami is very aggressive. She's very lane dominant. She has some of the best harassment in the game. I would say it probably is the best after the Sona changes. And the reason for that is her harass also heals her on one spell. Yeah, her harass heals her on one spell. So you can just go up and just spam W on them, plus auto attack, and then back up. And you're eventually going to whittle them down and do a lot of damage. You also have a nice stun, what's called a suspending or whatever. I don't know if that counts as... I don't think that's a knock-up. It is a knock-up. Okay, so that can trigger for Yasuo. So she has an okay stun if you can land it. This is really good for champions that want to chase people down. So something like a Vayne. This is excellent with Vayne because... you know, she gets the extra movement speed and she's going to be able to stick to him really easily. This is really good on something like an Olaf too. Or like a Volibear. Just anything that wants to be able to stick to people and chase them down. It's very good. Good on Lucian because each auto attack is going to trigger this. And he double attacks, you know, every time he dashes or every time he does an ability. So that's good. And then Tidal Wave is just a really good peel spell that you can activate from quite a long distance. So Nami, pretty strong in this patch. I think she still gets outscaled by Janna or Lulu. But if you are pretty confident you're going to be able to crush people in lane, then this can be a good choice. As far as runes go, I would probably just go for the Airy, Mana Flow, Celerity, Scorch, Bone Plating, Second Wind. I don't think you need Ingenious because you're probably going to be going Ardent Sensor. You might even go Athenes as like a third item on her. You can get Redemption. It's still alright, but similar to Lulu, she only has one heal spell on her W. I haven't tried Tier on her, but it's an interesting proposition because she can spam a lot of spells to stack that Tier up. She can spam her Q and her E while she's just running around randomly. Then that will allow her to spam her W a lot in fights. The only problem with that is she doesn't... I mean, she is a mana hog, but her W's on such a long cooldown anyways. You may not need it as much in a fight. Like, you may not be able to activate it a ton in a fight is what I'm trying to say. But if you can't get that tier fully stacked, that can be pretty good because she does scale really well with AP. I mean, this has, like, you know, either a 1.1 or a 1.3 ratio, depending on how you cast it, because remember, it has multiple bounces. And every piece of AP that you have, every 100 AP also increases the efficiency of the spell. So check out my Nami guide. I do have a Nami guide on the channel. I talk about just how good AP is on her, but it's extremely good. A lot of times she just can't itemize for it. But if you complete your tier and you're able to get Archangels like later in the game, then that could really, really open up some very powerful opportunities for you. So, yeah, I think Nami's pretty well positioned. Just her problem is she can get outscaled by Lulu and outscaled by Janna. But other than that, she's a really good pressure champion. So, and she uses Bone Plating and Second Wind very well. Okay, so you could sneak a tier in there. I haven't tried it, but it's interesting. If you're going to go tier, you need to get Transcendence instead of Celerity. And the reason for that is you're going to go over the CDR cap if you get that 20% off of Archangels. And you want to be able to convert that to AP so that it's not wasted. Okay, Alistar. Pretty decent. Alistar does have a build path, a rune path that makes him get around the Resolve debacle here, where you don't want to go Resolve as your primary, because he can go for Predator and do the roaming. So he can kind of do like what I was talking about with Rakan. He does it a little bit better because he makes really good use of Sudden Impact. I guess Rakan could go Sudden Impact as well. He just doesn't have a lot of damage abilities. But Rakan, or Alistar's WQ and then his E, and then auto-attacking them does quite a bit of damage. And adding Sudden Impact so that your auto and your magic damage that you're doing do a lot more is really appealing. And then, of course, you get Zombie and Ingenious Hunter. Ingenious, once again, lowers the cooldown on Predator. You can get Righteous Glory early. It'll lower that cooldown, too. So you're just constantly going to be able to roam around, make some big plays, and then you also benefit from Bone Plating and Second Wind, so you can't get poked out in lane as much. So this is really, really good. Once again, if they have a very exploitable mid laner, right? Brand, Diana, Anivia, you know, just anything that's going to be pretty immobile in the mid lane, you can go abuse him. And he can dive towers really easily, too, with his ult, obviously. So, he's pretty good. I think he's the best tank left because he has really hard engage and he scales really well. Or he has this option of going Predator Ingenious Hunter, which is very, very appealing. So, I think you would pick him over Rakan if you need tankiness and you need someone to be able to stay in a fight and disrupt. Someone who can go Righteous Glory, get in there, slow everybody down, and just disrupt and be like just a massive pain. But Andy has more kill threat in lane. That's another thing too, is Alistar can definitely get down and murder some people, you know, with Jen or Misfortune or whomever in lane, whereas Rakan's going to have a lot harder time doing that. He doesn't do as much damage, and his W is a lot harder to hit on mobile champions. But Rakan does scale better. You know, Rakan has plus healing and shielding, so he's going to be able to use things like Redemption, Locket, all that stuff a little bit more. Whereas Alistar is going to be stranded with basically like mobility boots, Righteous Glory, and then that's after that your items are, well, I guess you can still get like Knight's Vow and Locket, and that's all right. But Rakan's itemization is going to be a lot better than Alistar's. But Alistar is going to be a lot tankier, and he's going to have a lot more kill threat in lane. So it just depends on what you need. Zyra is still pretty good. She's the best AP champion. She can definitely just completely abuse Rakan. She can murder Lulu in lane, but you have to be able to catch him with your E. If you can't catch him to all in him, it's going to be a problem, especially once Lulu hits 6. It's really hard to kill somebody because she can just ult him. And bone plating plus second wind makes it really hard to poke people out, so it's kind of all in or nothing. So that neutralizes a lot of Zyra's early game pressure, and that people can just heal through it now with those runes. But, you know, she still is pretty strong. The lower the elo, the stronger she's going to be because it's going to be a lot easier to hit your roots. So if you hit your E consistently and you're able to, you know, blow people up and murder them in lane, which I did that a lot, climbing all the way through gold this season to get up into platinum, you know, she can be really good, but you need a lot of practice with her, and you need to be very confident you're going to be able to expose mispositionings by the enemy and really make them pay by hitting those roots. So if you can do that, she's great. If you can't do that, you probably need to pick somebody else. She's going to get outscaled unless she gets really far ahead. You know, once the Janna or the Lulu get to like 3 items, once they get their Redemption and their Locket, you're not really going to be able to kill people a lot anymore unless you're really far ahead. So, you know, the Leandri's buff was great. The Rylai's buff was great. All of those help her out in team fights. And you'll probably do, if you're a good Zyra, you'll probably do the most damage on the team. But it can be pretty rough early on. Blitzcrank gets a little bit better. I moved him up here. I don't like playing Blitz personally. He's too feast or famine for me. I like someone who's more consistent. But you'll notice everyone up here except for Alistar is super squishy, super easy to expose with a Blitz hook. So if you can land those Blitz hooks early and kill people, that's great. Keep in mind, they are going to have, you know, bone plating plus second wind. And that's going to make them harder to kill, not only because those runes are great at negating damage, but also because they're going to have a flat 65 extra health now because of going into the resolve tree. So that makes it very difficult for Blitz to burst people out. But if you do catch them, especially if you have a Misfortune, a Jen, something like that, that can early game blow people up, Blitz can be really good. There are a lot of squishies running around, so Blitz is definitely a respectable option, and you can go Predator on Blitz too, similar to Alistar, and just run and expose any vulnerable mid laner too. And you're going to be able to last through poke with bone plating and second wind. So, you know, once again, they have a Diana, they have, you know, just something else that's going to be really immobile and squishy in the mid lane. You can definitely go grab them with Blitz and take over the game. Karma, I raised up here because she's really good against Zyra, and she's respectable early on, at least, against Lulu. So she can apply a lot of pressure. She can speed people up, you know, like an Olaf or a Skarner or a Volibear. Her shield does speed people up, which is nice. I think that she can get abused by someone like Nami because Nami's going to have a heal and Karma doesn't. But she's a decent option. She's kind of like your second or third string here. You know, if Lulu and Janna are banned, and they are banned a lot, especially if you have a push comp. So if you have something like a Caitlyn, that is something that Karma does very well early on, and she does push. The only one who pushes okay is Lulu. But Karma pushes better, and you can just put them into the tower and just poke them under tower and take that tower really easily. So Karma is a very good early game bully, especially when she's paired with something like a Caitlyn or a Jinx, something that's going to be able to push in the lane and do a lot of damage. I would just go with the standard Airy, Ulti, Transcendent, Scorch, and then either Font of Life and Second Wind, or you can go Bone Plating. Font of Life is really nice because your Q is going to apply to a slow to a lot of people, and that's going to allow your Ardent Sensor to trigger on a bunch of people even without using your mantraed E. So that's helpful. But once again, you can also go Bone Plating if you want. I think Tear of the Goddess is tempting for her because she can spam a lot of abilities, and she can actually poke outside of just the landing phase because she has really long-range poke on a short cooldown. So you could even, in theory, go for something like Leandri's if you really want to get crazy and just try to poke people out if your team needs a little bit of extra poke, if they don't have a lot of healing on their team. That's a respectable option. It's kind of expensive, but you know, it would give you some more power, it'd give you more AP early, and it'd give you some good poke later because your Q already has a slow on it. And it's very spammable, so you know, it's something to consider. So I don't think she's amazing, but she is a really good counter pick to Zyra. She outranges her, and she's respectable into Lulu early on, but primarily I would pick her as a counter pick to Zyra or any other AP champion if Lulu and Janna are banned. Sona, I haven't tried her. You know, I think she could make a comeback here if you go tier Sona. Tier just got buffed, of course, which is excellent on her. Her mana costs are still really high early, but going, you know, Airy, Mana Flow, Transcendent, Scorch. Now she has Bone Plating and Second Wind, so she's not as much of a piece of paper as she was earlier. She's not going to get completely blown up, so that could be a game changer for Sona. They nerfed her scaling a lot on her E. I'd have to go back and do the math and see if it's worth it or not. I wasn't able to do it for the video. But she does have really good teamfight presence. As usual, she can spam her heal and shield. It's excellent with Ardent Sensor, excellent with Athene's Unholy Grail. So that's great. If they nerf Redemption in the future, which it's possible they might, she would definitely be one of the highest beneficiaries of that. Because Redemption's okay, but she only has one heal and shield off of her W, so I think she's okay. I would pick her if you want to against something like a Lulu or Nami. I don't know if she can out-harass a Nami, but she can definitely out-harass a Lulu or a Janna. Early on in lane because they don't have a heal and she does. So, you know, the prominence of Lulu and Janna might mean that Sona's back, but we'll see. Once again, she doesn't have a steroid like they do. She doesn't increase attack speed. She doesn't increase AD, but she does have, you know, the heal in lane. So she can apply more pressure. So she's okay. I'll have to try her out. I do have her tentatively in the top 2 here. It might be a situation where Lulu has to be banned before you can pick her. But historically, I have liked Sona into Janna. I have liked Sona into Lulu. But we'll see. They did nerf Sona a lot during the preseason. So she's still kind of in the penalty box. Soraka can be really strong. But if they have assassins, then that's a problem. Also, if the AD carry gets Executioner's Calling, she gets countered really hard. All of these other ones can get around Executioner's Calling because they all do different stuff. You know, right? It doesn't affect Lulu really at all. It marginally affects Janna. It'll affect her ult, but not her shield. Rakan doesn't care. Nami, yeah, you can cut her healing a little bit, but she has a lot of other CC. Karma doesn't care. Sona is like, okay, it does affect Sona, but half of Sona's W is a shield anyways. But Soraka is like all heal. Like all of her utilities are healing. She's just a heal bot. I mean, yeah, she does have a silence, which is nice. She does have harassment with her Q early, but primarily like her biggest contributions are heals. So if they get Executioners, you're pretty much screwed. So you're kind of putting your life in their hands. Like you can heal through it. You can still be impactful, but that item just screws you. Like it's really bad. So she's a bit risky for me. I do like her. She is a lot of fun, but if they get Executioners, I feel real bad. Okay, then we'll just kind of float through these final, the tier 3 here. So this is always the top 10 champions, tier 1, tier 2. Tier 3 is the next 10. Taric is one of the best of the surviving tanks because, you know, he does scale really well off of Guardian, and he can use Revitalize. Still really good for team fighting. Equinox feels bad on him. He does benefit from tier pretty heavily. You know, he can still go Redemption, Locket. He's sort of like a tankier version of Janna. He is pretty good with all ends. Like if Olaf wants to run in, you can give him invulnerability, which is really nice. So Taric is still pretty respectable, still pretty good. He can get totally dumpstered in lane, but his ability to go Bone Plating plus Second Wind might help him out. So yeah, he's okay. You just need to make sure that your AD carry scales better than their AD carry, because if you're playing Taric and they have something like Zyra Rakan, you're basically going to be worthless because you can't ever get to them and do anything. So, and you can't help your teammates get to them either. So that's kind of a problem. But overall, he can be really good. Tom Kench, still a pretty good counter pick if they pick something like Thresh. If they pick something like Leona, he can counter. He's all right. You know, the problem with Tom, though, is he can get around it. Like, he can go Glacial Augment, Footwear, Biscuit, Approach Velocity. Glacial Augment's okay. Like, he's good against other bruisers. So if they have another melee tank, if they have a Braum, or if they have, like, an Alistar or a Taric or something like that, you can maybe make some plays. But, you know, primarily he's anti-CC. So if they go Ashe, Varus, Leona, Thresh, you can go him. But those champions aren't going to be that popular right now outside of Varus. So I think you're going to be facing a lot of enchanters, and I think all of them are just going to outscale Tom Kench most of the time. So if you do get a counter pick, if they do have Leona or they do have Thresh, he can be pretty good. He's also all right against Olaf because you can just swallow your AD carry and just wait for Olaf's thing to wear out. So that's helpful. So he does have a couple of niche uses, but overall, I think the meta is shifting away from him a little bit. So he's okay, but he's primarily a counter pick. Brand, worst version of Zyra. He can't apply as much poke early. He does have good all-in. He is interesting with tier because then you can keep spamming your abilities even outside of lane, especially if occasionally you get to a side lane, you want to push it really quickly or something right before you're going to take an objective. Tier's going to help him out with that. So he's okay. I just think that Zyra's just going to be better overall. Braum's pretty good. I know we have a lot of Braum fans on the channel. It just feels really bad because he has to go Resolve, and he's going to have to get a Worthless ring. Like, he has to get Unflinching. It feels really bad. And, yeah, I mean, he has to get Equinox. He has to get Tabi. He's one of the, like, biggest victims of this kind of purge of tanks. So, you know, he's okay, but he is good against Xayah. He is good against Twitch if you want to pick him in those scenarios. It's just going to be a bit harder with him now because all of his items have been nerfed, and he's going to get outscaled a lot of the time by Janna, Lulu, those types of champions. But he is very good against those area of effect type of things. He's good against Nami. He can block all of her wave. So he's good against Nami, good against Xayah, good against Twitch. So he does have good matchups that are popular in the meta. It's just, you want to pick him as a counter pick. I would not pick him unless you know a lot about the enemy team, like 4th or 5th pick. Morgana, very similar to Tom Kench. Just kind of has weak runing going on. You know, she kind of has to go Guardian and Revitalize, but it doesn't feel that great. I would not go Airy on her or Comet or anything like that. You're just not going to be able to do enough harassment with Morg. You're basically going to sit there and, like, use your W to push lane and maybe land a bind. If you ever miss a bind, they're going to punish you really hard in your lane. So, once again, if they have really hard CC, they have a Leona, they have a Thresh, they have an Ashe, they have a Sejuani or something like that. You know, that Black Shield can be really good at protection. She is very good against Rakan because the Black Shield blocks his engage, then you can bind him, and then he's dead, pretty much, unless he grabs Mikhail's. So she does have a good matchup against Rakan, but against a lot of other champions, she's just too conditional, she's too iffy. She is pretty good if you don't want to run Kench. If you want to run an enchanter who can run, you know, like Redemption and get some benefit out of it, Ardent Sensor, then she can definitely be a decent pick. If your team needs a little bit of, like, uncertain engage, you just want to have a chance to hit some people with binds in the mid game, she can be decent. So she's all right. I just don't think she's top tier right now. Zillion, he's okay. I just did a guide for Zillion. You know, if you do go for the Font of Life, Ardent Sensor, Athene's build, it can be pretty good. If you double bomb people consistently, that's the biggest thing. If you land that double bomb, he's good. If you don't land the double bomb, he's bad. So it's up to you. You know, if you can double bomb, you know, QWQ and land that a lot in lane, then you can be a powerhouse. Other than that, it's kind of rough. This is one of the best metas for Zillion because you can speed people up like Volibear, Skarner, Olaf. You know, when you put that E on them and they can run in, they can make really, really good use of that. So that is helpful. And he does have some protection against assassins with his ult, obviously. So that, once again, complements, you know, someone like Volibear running in and then you can just save him and he resurrects. Or like Kha'Zix, who just wants to jump in, or Rengar is another great example, who wants to jump in and, you know, kill some people, and then right before he dies, you resurrect him. That's powerful. I just think Lulu does all of that better. I feel like she speeds people up. She can speed Olaf in. She can ult him. I just feel like she has more utility to her, but she's going to be banned a lot. So if she's banned and you want that type of effect where you speed people up and protect them once they get in there, the diver, then Zillion could be a good second or third string if Lulu's banned and maybe if Karma's banned. I'm not sure who's better, Zillion or Karma right now. They're both kind of like, if Lulu's banned and you want to do the speed thing, they're both decent options. Karma has better push, and I think Zillion has better protection with his ult. So it just kind of depends on what you want. Bard is another one. He's okay. He's a bit of an odd duck. He can apply a lot of pressure early, but he's going to have a hard time getting through second wind and bone plating. He can scale decently later into the game. I recommend Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Zombie, Relentless, Font of Life, Second Wind. Font of Life, if you slow people with your meeps, will allow you to run something like Ardent Censer or Athene's Unholy Grail, get a bit more utility out of him. Historically, Bard has had a problem with itemization. People usually just go Redemption Lock-in on him because there's just nothing else to get. But you can actually go Ardent Censer and Athene's as long as you're running Font of Life, because your slow is going to trigger the font, and that's going to heal people and allow you to go off with the Ardent and Athene's. So Bard's okay. Shen, pretty good engaged tank. It's kind of a feels bad, so he has to go Aftershock, Bone Plating, Second Wind. He has to get Unflinching, which is basically a wasted rune. It's okay. It's just, it feels really bad to have to get that rune. But he does apply a lot of pressure early. He applies a lot of global pressure. He scales pretty well. He can do quite a bit of damage. He can solo out a lot of 80 carries later on in the game. He's a really good Banner of Command user because he doesn't have to get mana. So you can get that item really early without worrying about short-changing yourself on resources. Most other tanks have to get some kind of mana item early or they run out of mana, and he can go around the map with his little, E-dash over walls to place that banner in side lanes and return back to your team with your ult if you have to. So he's a decent, split push support, which is kind of weird, but if the enemy team doesn't have a good splitter or your team has a good 1-3-1 comp, he's pretty good because he can always ult back to your team. So if your team needs extra split push pressure from the support role and you want a tank, he's a pretty good option for that. Thresh, kind of making a comeback. Pretty good against squishies if you land your stuff against him. You want to go coin on him these days. They've just nerfed Relic Shield too much. He has pretty bad itemization. I hear my daughter freaking out there. But, if you're a one-trick Thresh, it's an okay time to play him because people are playing less tanks. If you don't one-trick him, it's not that great. The itemization is still really wacky on him because he's considered a ranged champion, so he doesn't benefit from Knight's Vow and stuff like that. I think a lot of people, if you're going to play him, will probably run, Righteous Glory, Banner, Coin, stuff like that. Okay, a lot of people are still going Equinox. I feel like Coin is going to be better right now. A lot of people are kind of getting Locket, Righteous. He's okay. He's definitely better now than he was because people are playing less tanks, but he still has, a lot of problems in terms of his itemization and runing. As far as runes go, I think you still kind of have to go either Guardian or Aftershock. Oh, I forgot to change this up. Let me see. So he's kind of a feels bad too, where you have to go Unflinching, but he's okay. Bone Plating, Second Wind does help him get through poke in the laning phase a little bit better, but like I said, if you're not a one-trick Thresh, this is not a good time to jump in. And then finally, we have Sion here. I put him in as kind of fan service. I know a lot of people love Sion. I do not recommend this guy in the support role because he is a lane bully, but he's so predictable. He falls off really hard late game. He has very low scaling. His engage is sketchy at best. I mean, he's best used against champions that don't have escapes, like Kog'Maw, Jinx, stuff like that, where maybe you can hit him with your R later on. He does have good harass with Comet in lane, so he can kind of get around the problem of the Resolve tree by going Comet, Mana Flow, Celerity, Scorch, and then he can run Bone Plating, Second Wind. So you can bully people out in lane. He is a pretty good peeler, and he's just going to be impossible to kill later. I just think that he just doesn't do enough. He doesn't bring enough utility to his team. But you can go things like Banner of Command, Knight's Vow, Locket, maybe even Righteous Glory to get in close to people. Righteous is actually okay, because then you can actually, reliably get in their face and then ult them, right in their face and Q, chain that together with your Q, so he's alright. I just think if you want to run a tank that adds some pressure early, I would probably just go Alistar, but, Sion, he can be okay. He can be okay. I just feel the higher up in Elo you go, the tougher it gets to make him work. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Definitely a lot longer than I wanted it to be. It's just hard to talk about all these champions with any kind of depth, but without going, you know, way over time. But we'll try again next patch. We'll see if we can do it faster, but hopefully this is some really good information for you. I wanted to make sure I covered all of that because I know people have a lot of questions about runes, items, all these different champions, because the meta is really shuffling around quite a bit. It's definitely transitioning from tanks back to enchanters. And so I just wanted to explain why, give you some of my thoughts, and then, you know, all of my current recommendations for runes and items. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.